wouldn't work so good. So I had finished the para, and then I looked at it and I realized that this doesn't look like good para. The texture was off, the color was off. So I thought, well, I can't offer this to Prabhupada. So let me offer what I had made for the deities. They were nice. So I put that aside. And then Radhanath Brahmachari, he was going around collecting the milk sweets and all the other sweets. So rather than taking the ones that I had set aside for Prabhupada, he took the other ones. So when I came back, I realized what happened. I said, oh God. I was thinking, Prabhupada's not even going to look at them. They're just so bad. And then the next day, Kirtananda, he hardly ever talked to me because he was always busy doing so many things. He made it a point to come and see me. He was like incredulous. He looked at me, he said, I saw Prabhupada do something that I've never seen him do before. He ate 3 of your para, one after another.
There were some Sankirtan devotees who were bathing in a stream they thought was on our property and was some other guy's property, and they were arrested in their kopans or gumshas and taken to jail, and they spent the night in jail, and they went before the judge the next day, and the judge took one look at them and said, why have you arrested them? These are Swami's men, and immediately let them go. I remember that same judge came to see Srila Prabhupada, and even though he was a judge, he was in overalls or blue jeans or whatever it was, he was very casually dressed in boots. And he came right up and he dropped right on Prabhupada's lap a big grocery bag. And Prabhupada looked into the bag and looked up, and it was vegetables from the garden. The man had brought Prabhupada a sack of tomatoes and squash. And Prabhupada said, this is love, when someone brings you something from their garden. And the man was completely charmed by Prabhupada.
I remember at one darshan, Srila Prabhupada pulled out a letter that had recently been received from a very, very important personality in India. And Srila Prabhupada gave the letter to the secretary to read. And he read the letter, and in this letter, the person was glorifying Srila Prabhupada for his translations of all the Vedic literatures, and just, appreciating how profound they were, and how they were obviously dictated by the Supreme Lord himself, because this could not have been done by any ordinary jiva, any ordinary living being, but someone who was really empowered. And I remember Srila Prabhupada's beaming smile. It was very innocent. Srila Prabhupada was always so, in many ways, he was so childlike and innocent. And he just smiled, and of course we all, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada.
This one evening, all the Sankirtan women were allowed to go and, have darshan and sit out in the front yard. I can't even remember what he was talking about. And then there was like a lull, and it was quiet, and everyone was just kind of sitting there, and he was just like looking at me, and he asked, are you all right? And I didn't quite think he was talking to me, because there was no reason for him to ask me anything like that. He just said it a few times. He looked at me again and said, are you all right? And then I finally said, are you talking to me? And he said, such a thin cloth, haven't you got a cloth? Because it was kind of chilly, and most of the devotees had chadars and sweaters and things, and he just asked if I needed a cloth. And I don't know what I said, something like, well, I had one, but not with me. Then he started talking to Kaladri, who was right there next to him, and told him that, you must find out if they have everything they need. The women need to be protected. He said, they will not ask. He said, you must ask them once a month and make sure that they are having everything they need. I just remember afterwards, like, a few of the devotees were crying and feeling like he just was so observant and concerned, and he just really does care about all of us.
We were in invited to go on a morning walk with Prabhupada, Mahara and myself, because we were the top book distributors amongst the ladies. So we got to go to the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, and it was Brahmananda, Hridayananda Swami, Lilamrita. So Prabhupada was saying to them, I had a dream, and I dreamt that we had a boat, and I traveled with 25 sannyasis and 25 brahmacharis all over the world in this boat. And then Lilamrita said, I have some boating experience. And Brahmananda said, yeah, I also have some boating experience. Maybe we can go with you, Prabhupada. So they were laughing when they would like to go with Prabhupada on that boat to travel all over the world and in each port have Sankirtan.
I was doing my surgical residency in Rochester, New York. Devotees were coming to us from Buffalo Temple, and we heard that Srila Prabhupada would be coming for a day in New York City. So we drove to New York City almost 300 miles and went to Henry Street Temple in New York City. Srila Prabhupada was there. We listened to his class, then we were escorted to his room, his darshan room. And afterwards I asked Srila Prabhupada a question that I have been chanting for a couple years, but my mind goes hither and thither when I chant, how I could curb my mind. And Srila Prabhupada told me that you concentrate on the holy name and go on chanting, and by the power of the holy name, you will be able to overcome your wandering mind. So I took that instruction and I applied that instruction to some extent, and there was definite improvement in my chanting because of that instruction.
This is one of the first darshans that Prabhupada gave in Caracas. Prabhupada took great pleasure in discussing with the lawyer, Bolivar Barrios, that's his name, which is that man that you see there. He was a young man, actually. He already passed away, that lawyer. And he would pose all these questions, challenges of our philosophy. And Prabhupada would be very keen in replying to him.
So the first devotees who went to preach to Venezuela, they were from America and Canada. From Canada was Hanuman Goswami at the time. He went to preach to the university, and he didn't know that most of the students were communist and Marxist. So he started to preach against atheism and communism. And a big discussion happened, and the student became very disturbed by his opinion. So they became so disturbed that they decided to hang him up. He was practically speaking running for his life. So this lawyer, his name is Bolivar, he was passing through with his car through the university, and he saw an orange-robed man running and so many people behind him shouting very angrily at him. So he stopped his car and opened the door. So the devotee, he ran and jumped on the car. And in this way, he practically speaking, saved the devotee's life. My feeling is that because of that, he continued to have relationship with the devotees and finally even with Srila Prabhupada himself. Actually, he was going every day to the morning walks with Prabhupada. One day, he could not come for some urgent business. Prabhupada, as soon as he walked out of the car, asked for him, "Where is the lawyer?"
One interesting point I notice over and over is how Prabhupada has his own train of thought. It's so unexpected. He doesn't follow your train of thought. You know, you're expecting something from him. And like, for example, I told him how even the scientists, they acknowledge that whatever is created from Krishna is even better. Although they don't say it's created from Krishna, but you know, everything that comes from nature is better. So I told him, they say that this body is the most perfect machine. But Prabhupada even didn't accept that and said, well, where is perfection? No, I said, but it's the most perfect machine. Not that it's perfect, but it's the most perfect machine. But Prabhupada said, where's perfection? If it's perfect, then why we die? You see how Prabhupada took it from another angle.
One question the lawyer asked during the morning walk was, ancient South America, before the Spanish went there, many things are similar to Vedic culture. Why there are so many similarities? And Prabhupada told him that actually in previous ages, all the planet was following Vedic culture. And that gradually faded up, Only in India, small amount of that culture is still there, Prabhupada said. But practically speaking, all over the world is vanished. Then Prabhupada told us about how Lord Ramachandra was taken to Brazil, to the Amazon. That was Maharavana's capital, Ravana's brother. Prabhupada said that Ravana's soldiers took him through a tunnel, 8,000 miles from Sri Lanka to Brazil, with the idea to sacrifice Ramchandra in front of goddess Kali. So Ramchandra told them, I'm a prince, I don't know how to bow down, you have to show me how to do it. So all the demoniac soldiers bowed down, and Ramchandra took advantage, taking the sword and chop off their heads. And interestingly, in ISKCON farm in Brazil, there is a town called Hanuman, a very ancient town, and the original name of Brazil is Pindorama. So Rama's name is there, and Hanuman's name is there even now. Another interesting question that the lawyer asked was about food shortage in the world. He said, what our movement proposed to solve this problem? And Prabhupada pointed to a tree. There was a small bird eating a fruit on a branch. And he told the lawyer, you see that tree? You see that bird? Krishna is feeding this bird. Krishna is feeding all the living entities. So there is no scarcity of food. The only scarcity in this world is lack of God consciousness or Krishna consciousness. And we're trying to give people, especially if the leaders take it up, then all this artificial problem of food shortage will be solved immediately. Then Rianda Maharaj said, oh Prabhupada, we have also our food relief in Mayapur. This can be done also here in South America. Prabhupada said, why not? But it should be prasad, not ordinary food. Because if you give them ordinary food, they will become more lusty, more materialistic. It should be prasad.
We're on an airplane from Mexico City to Caracas. And Prabhupada started taking his puffed rice and peanuts. He ate for about 10 minutes or so, and then he just looked and said, okay. So I moved the puffed rice over, and I gave half to Paramahamsa. The other half I had in front of me. And after a few minutes, there was this stewardess. She's walking down the aisle, and she stops right in front of us, and she reached over, put her hand in my plate, and grabbed a handful of puffed rice, threw it in her mouth. And she says, oh, this is wonderful. What is it? And I said, oh, puffed rice. And she says, why are you eating this? And I said, well, we have our own diet and we're vegetarian. And she said, oh, is there anything else I can get you? And I looked at Prabhupada, and he just looked at me, said, hot milk. And she said, fine. So after about 10 minutes, she comes back with 3 plates. And she left, and I turned to Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada, that's amazing, isn't it? And Prabhupada just said, no. He said, women, they have natural propensity to serve. And of course, I was thinking it was amazing that she took Prabhupada's Mahaprasadam right off of my plate. Somehow or other, she got what all of us were just mad after, was Prabhupada's remnants. So when I travel, it's always one of my favorite stories. So one day I was giving class, and I told the story, and after class, a devotee boy came up to me, and he said, that's an amazing story. Can I tell you Sankirtan's story? And I said, yes. He said, we would go out to the villages far from all the cities in Brazil and different places. You have to go by 4-wheel drive. And one day, we were in the rainforest, really far away from everywhere, and we found this village, and we did our Harinam. And then he said we began going door to door to distribute books. Then I went to this one house, and I knocked on the door, and a woman answered and tried to distribute books. And as soon as she saw me, he said I was in Dodi and Kurta, and she invited me in. I went in and I started seeing there were pictures of Krishna on the wall, and she had an altar, she had deities, and he was so surprised. And then he said, "You're a devotee?" And she said, "Yes, yes." "So wonderful to see a devotee," she said, "here." And he said, "Well, how did you become a devotee?" And she said, "Well, the first time I met devotees was I met Prabhupada on an airplane. I was a stewardess." So this was the woman. It was 10 years later. From that time, after she took the Mahaprasadam, then she met devotees again and got a book, and that was it. That was the beginning of her spiritual life. Just seeing what Prabhupada has done, it's mind-boggling to understand how Prabhupada has made devotees. And it just goes on and on.
When Prabhupada arrived in Caracas, we were extremely happy. We greeted him with flowers. We escorted him to his Vyasasan, and I had the task to wash his feet. Nobody had instructed me how to do this. I just saw the ingredients, the yogurt and the milk and the ghee and honey and so on and water. So I just concluded that I should go from thick to thin, and I started with the honey. The first thing I did was I took the Prabhupada's socks off and I touched his feet, and it was really, really soft. This is the softest skin I've ever touched. And I started to pour the honey and then the yogurt and then the ghee and milk like that. And then I started to massage his feet, even between his toes. Consciously, I wanted to alleviate his tensions, but that was not accepted. Nitai Prabhu and Paramahansa and other devotees were shouting at me, Havi, Havi, what are you doing? This is not what I was supposed to do. And I was a little afraid that I was committing some offense or some mistake, and I slowly lifted my head towards Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada nodded his head as if to say, you go on, no problem. In any case, all the ingredients were there in this stainless steel bowl, and I started to spray everybody with Charanamrita, with this nectar of Prabhupada's feet. Everybody was in ecstasy. We were jumping up and down. And, I did like 4 or 5 rounds of this. Everybody was practically wet, and I took the remnants to the kitchen, and then a wild idea came into my mind, and I drank the whole thing. Like 2 glasses of that blessed liquid. I remember I jumped up and down just by myself at the kitchen. Nobody saw me. I was the happiest soul alive.
Prabhupada actually cried when he looked at the deities of Gaura-Nitai. So during a lecture, he was saying how he was very touched that Sri Sri Gaura-Nitai had come so far away from the holy Dham. Latin devotees are generally very emotional, so when Prabhupada started crying, it was very touching for all of us. Then some girl got up and, at one point she said, there's Maya here in this temple, she said. And so Prabhupada told her, if there's some place where Maya is not, let us go there immediately.
When Prabhupada arrived at the airport, it was a very ecstatic moment for me because I saw Atlanta Airport as being a place where Prabhupada performed his pastimes So I always connected book distribution with Prabhupada performing his pastimes because I knew that that service meant so much to him, and I always felt his presence when I was distributing books. And having him in the airport, the place where at one time more books were distributed than any other place on this planet, was very ecstatic because to me it was the Dham. And there he was in that place. It was overwhelming. I was just so ecstatic.
In order to let the devotees get to the temple first, I took a long route. So we drove through this excellent neighborhood and then came to the temple. The devotees had already arrived, and there was this ocean of devotees, all in complete ecstasy with their hands, reaching up to the Vaikuntha. And Srila Prabhupada just beamed from ear to ear, just beamed. You could feel it in the car. You could just feel the ecstatic energy emanating from him. So as the car pulled up to the temple, Prabhupada got out, and no one's feet were on the ground. It was like, the part of the Bhagavatam where it describes in Maharaj Yudhishthira's kingdom, no one felt anxiety, no one felt the pain of hunger or thirst or separation from relatives or all these things that we are constantly disturbed by. At that time, no one felt it. You did not feel the pain of being in the material world. It was Vaikuntha. And Srila Prabhupada was the conductor of the orchestra, and we were all members of the orchestra playing our different parts.
In Atlanta, Prabhupada began his lectures not by singing Jai Radha Madhava, but by singing Parama Karuna, Pahundwijana, Nitai Gaurachandra, in a very slow,